the recording. And that has now come up. So with your
Pauline,
yes,
Pauline, can I ask, it keeps appearing on my screen that we have a number of people still trying to get into the executive committee. Is that correct, or you know?
That may be correct, Chair. Just before I joined this meeting, I did go into the executive committee to advise any members there that they needed to come in through the climate change. Perhaps my colleague John Burke could go into the executive committee. I'll send him a joining instruction, and we'll try to get the members out of that if that's all right.
Thank you very much,
Pauline.
Pauline.
I think there's some operator error. Just bear with me, Chair.
When was the last time so many councillors were quiet all at once?
I'll respond. Never.
Apologies, Chair, the meeting room has cleared now, so everyone should be at the correct meeting. I'll just go ahead with your permission, Chair, and take this adherence.
Yes, thanks very much, Pauline.
Councillor Allison, I see that you're here. Councillor Anderson, you're also here. Councillor Bradley?
Yeah, here.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Brown is here. Councillor Callaghan is here. Councillor Chalmers also here. Councillor Convery.
Here, Pauline.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Here, Pauline.
Thank you. Councillor Craig.
Here.
Councillor Devlin.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dorman is here. Councillor Fagan.
I'm here, Pauline.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Harrow is here. Councillor Lockhart is here. Councillor Logan.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
I'm here.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor McAdams is here. Councillor McGuigan is here. Councillor Miller.
I'm here, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Nealon.
Here.
Councillor Ross is here. Councillor Shearer.
Here.
Councillor Wardhaw. Councillor Wardhaw. Nothing from Councillor Wardhaw. I have apologies from Councillor. Oh, you're here. Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Wark, and I see that Councillor Wilson is here. I'm not aware of any substitute who is attending for Councillor Wark. So thank you, Chair. I'll hand back to you.
Pauline, you didn't read out my name.
Oh, Councillor Hamilton. Yes, sorry, I have actually marked you as present. My apologies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pauline, you didn't call out me either. Councillor Walker.
Councillor Walker, I have you as a substitute at this meeting.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just
problem, thank you.
observed, sorry.
Yes,
I've
absolutely.
no idea what I'm on anymore, sorry.
Thank you
Apologies.
very much. I think there have been recent changes, but thank you very much. Chair, I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pauline. Right, we'll get started then. Declarations of interest, are there any? No. Move to item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Do any colleagues have any questions of the minutes? No. Can we agree the minutes of last meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed. Moving on to monitoring items, which item 3, the food growing strategy. And I would ask Lynn Carr to give us a report on this, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to note the actions and the measures in respect of the food growing strategy for 2020/21. Section 3 of the report provides the background on the development of the strategy itself and the action plan, the strategic vision and the key objectives. The strategy was approved by the Executive Committee in December 2019 and covers the period 2020 to 2025. Section 4 of the report summarises the progress made in the first 6 months, covering the 1st of April 2020 to the 30th of September. And the Food Growing Strategy Action Plan is contained in Appendix 1. Paragraph 4.3 outlines the overall summary at the end of quarter 2. And despite the impact of the pandemic, one of the 31 actions has not been met, and this related to a site visit with members of the food growing group to visit a council run site to see how that operated. I won't run through the full action plan, but the main points to note include that there's a new site at Lammermoor currently under construction. It was delayed slightly because of the pandemic. However, that's planned to be completed around springtime this year. Planning applications have also been submitted for 2 further small sites, one in Burnhill and the other in Straven. And despite the creation of new sites at Fernbrae Meadows and Murray Recreation, as well as these planned sites, lockdown has actually led to a surge in applications to the waiting list. So it's gone from around 300 to 530 since lockdown. New community growing areas have been developed in Straven Park and Crofthead Park in Uddingston, and we're continuing to work with many community groups to deliver other forms of food growing as well as the formal sites. In terms of sustainability, just to give a couple of examples of what's happening, we've provided food waste bins to the Murray Owen Centre, which is located adjacent to the Murray Recreation site. They're actually composting waste generated from their cafe and providing compost to the site for use there on top of what the plot holders managed to generate themselves. Compost bins and additional water butts have also been provided to Fernbrae Meadows and Murray Recreation sites. It's just a small example, but there's many things ongoing to try and increase sustainability at these sites. Paragraph 4.5 details the food growing actions that will be reported as part of the Good Food Strategy updates, as that avoids any duplication between the 2 strategies. Section 5 of the report highlights the employee implications, not only for my team in Amenity Services, as we're responsible for monitoring the implementation of the action plan, but it's also relevant for any other resource in the council who also provide food growing provision within their respective services. Section 6 highlights that there will be no specific financial implications at this stage. However, as new sites progress, we would report any individual cases individually. And Section 7 details how the food growing strategy and action plan contributes to the council's overall sustainability and climate change aims. Just like to refer you back to Section 2 and ask committee to note the contents of the quarter 2 update report. Thank you.
Councillor Ross, you're muted.
It always takes someone, doesn't it? It may as well be the chair that starts it. No, thanks for that report, Lynn. I know it's been a very difficult year. You've been working under different circumstances, but thanks for the report. I'll open it up to colleagues for questions. I see Robert has his hand up. Robert.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I just wondered, on the point of view of allotments and community gardens and things, whether there'd been any look at the potential of tenemental backcourt areas in this regard. I mean, they're quite tricky to get everybody involved, and not everybody wants it, and not all the areas are suitable. But it seems a fairly obvious type thing, both for the food growing aspect and also for the general amenity thing around the backcourt areas. I just wondered if that was an aspect that the community engagement team had been looking at.
Absolutely. We have a food growing group which is made up of all the resources within the council, as well as every third party organisation and community group. Part of the discussions that we have been having with housing and technical resources is about identifying small areas of land in backcourts, but not only that, maybe around tower blocks as well, where people don't have access to outside space. To be absolutely fair to them, there's been a bit of a delay in terms of the pandemic because the services have been diverted elsewhere, but it is something that's on the horizon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just as an insight there as well, I attended the Glasgow City Region Cabinet meeting yesterday, and they're just about to launch the Clyde Climate Forest, and a lot of that is about canopy cover and trying to find places in high density areas where we can provide canopy cover, trees, etc. So what I'll do is I'll try and get the slide information on that and circulate it through the council and maybe through yourself, Lynn, something like that, just to make sure people are aware of what's actually happening in the bigger picture. Okay. That
would be great. It's something we're working on. Ian's team, the arboricultural team, are in the midst of looking at a tree canopy cover strategy, and we've been liaising with them to look at whether we can incorporate fruit tree areas within some of the areas as well as part of the action plan for next year.
Good, thanks very much. Any other colleagues' questions?
Councillor McAdams.
Councillor McAdams.
Thanks, John. It's just a quickie. Seeing in the Appendix 1 and it's 5.1, you talk about businesses. Could we be told what businesses?
We're not, there has been a bit of a delay because of the pandemic, but we don't have any specific businesses involved at this stage. It's just discussions that have been ongoing with other teams within the council to see if there are any businesses that approach the council that could be referred to us, because we're trying to link businesses to any groups within their local areas if a business makes an approach. But at this stage, there aren't any active businesses asking about it at the moment, probably because of the pandemic, to be honest.
Okay, just a subsequent then, could it be something that we could approach the house builders?
Yeah, it is something we're liaising with planning on the open space audit, and there is a bit of discussion surrounding how we can incorporate food growing areas into new developments rather than creating just formal allotment sites, because part of the legislation isn't just about the creation of allotments and raised bed sites, it's about every form of alternative food growing. So that is something that we're looking at as part of the open space audit.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does any other colleague have any questions? I can't see any hands. I would move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We will then move on to item 4, which is Good Food Strategy and Food Growing Strategy Action Plan. And can I invite Helen Goodger on to please give us a report on this? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to review the action plan for the second year of implementation of the Good Food Strategy, and its action plan incorporates the main action of the food growing strategy. So section 3 of the report provides some background information on the development and implementation of both strategies. Section 4 of the report provides some more detailed information about the Good Food Strategy Action Plan 2021-2022, and the action plan is available in Appendix 1. The action plan includes 2 sections, one for performance indicators and the other one for projects. In line with the structure of the strategy, each section is divided under 6 good food themes. Measures and action are reported by outcomes as defined in the strategy. COVID-19 continues to impact on the implementation of the first year action plan, and this is also reflected in year 2. So with some of the action delayed in year 1 have been brought forward to year 2. Some baseline indicator which was to be defined in year 1 will tentatively be defined in year 2. The approach adopted for some project initiatives has changed given the restriction with more online activities. And tackling food insecurity was already a priority in year 1, but there is a renewed focus given the impact of COVID-19 in food access. In relation to this, community organizations have been playing a key role in the implementation of activities to tackle food insecurity in year 1, and the Council will continue to support them in year 2. In total, there are 16 organizations in the 4 areas of South Lanarkshire involved in food distribution. Section 5 of the report provides information about the Good Food Growing Strategy 2021-2022. So as mentioned by Lynn previously, given the relationship between the 2 strategies and the requirement report with similar timescales, main progress on the implementation of the food growing strategy will be reported in the good food strategy with 4 performance indicators and 1 encompassing action in relation to food growing. So the food growing action plan being very detailed with 31 actions. Progress on each action will be directly reported to the food growing group. However, the detailed action plan will be published in April 2021 as part of the statutory obligations defined by the Scottish Government. Section 6 presents the monitoring framework. So progress will be reported to this committee at Q2 and Q4 using the improved system. Section 7, 8, and 9 refer to SEA, employee implication, financial implications, and there are no specific implications to report at this stage. Section 10 gives an overview of the sustainability and climate change implications of the Good Food Strategy. I will now refer you back to Section 2 of the report, asking to agree the action plan for the 2nd year of implementation of the Good Food Strategy, incorporating the main actions for the food growing strategy. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that report, Helene. Do any colleagues have any questions? Monique, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It was to do with, so thank you very much for the report. It's great. It's page 32. I just wanted to ask a question with regards to the develop a roadmap and undertake actions to increase procurement of sustainable food. Obviously, we all welcome this and we all think it's very important. But whereas in other sections, there's dates, there's no date for this. So it was something that I would like a date put down so that it means that we then know what we're working to. Then also it means that we can actually see what the increase actually is, and is it enough, and is there more that we should do. I just feel as if the report's brilliant and it's really clear on so many things, and I think that we would all agree that procurement is one of the messiest and probably hardest things that we've got in the council. So I really feel as if we need to actually like tie something down, and it's not tied down.
Has that been noted, Helene?
Yeah, so this new group focusing on sustainable food procurement is about to be established. So we'll have the first meeting this month, and during this first meeting we will work on a time frame and we'll define the objectives of this group. So this is why at this stage we couldn't put any date, and obviously we'll also discuss the baseline indicators. So this will be done at a later stage in the next months.
Thank you very much. Any other colleague have any questions?
Chair, can I ask a subsequent, please?
Yes.
Helena, can I ask a question then? Does this mean that, see what we've then discussed just now, so see after the group meets, does that mean then that this report would come back, or it would just be an update to the committee saying, and we've decided these dates, just so it means that we then have the fresh information? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that'll be circulated. Yeah, a timeline will be put in there in the document. Okay. Any other questions? I see a hand still. Sorry,
Councillor Allison, Chair.
Right, thanks very much, Councillor Allison.
Thanks for that report, Helen. There's 3 areas I was wanting to ask about. Is any work being done to identify why only well, it's under 60% of primary school children and less than 50% of secondary school children who are entitled to free school meals are taking advantage of those. Secondly, if I can find it, regarding the waste, I take it the waste from school kitchen is simply the margin between what they've cooked and what the number of school meals that have been required that day, and the food waste from the school dining room is actually the waste that people who have had children who have had their meal delivered haven't eaten it all. And thirdly, regarding what organisations have the schools been working with? I mean, I'm aware of programmes through QMS, RET, I think the Potato Council as well had one. Do you have numbers of the schools and pupils who have been involved with those regarding food growing?
Thanks very much, Helen.
Yeah, in relation to your first question, so entitlement of free school meals, yeah, it's something that we are looking at. So obviously during last year, this has been highly action have been disturbed with COVID-19. It's also something that so there were a group part of the local poverty action plan. So a group with colleagues from education and facility have been looking at that. And I believe they will continue to do so. In relation to waste in school, so you're right to say that it's waste coming from the dining room, because obviously waste from the kitchen are very limited. And your last question, sorry, it was about. Can you just repeat the last question, sir?
There are various organisations that are working within schools, etc. QMA, Quality Meat Scotland, RED, Royal Highland Education Trust, and I think another one that I'm aware of is the Potato Council, who have different programmes. Can you tell us what interaction there has been between the schools and these programmes that are already running?
Yeah, so I think later during this committee we'll have a report from Lynn about sustainability and schools. So she will certainly provide more better answers than me. But so we've been liaising with Food for Life, given the objective of the council to join Food for Life and to achieve one of the standards by next year. So this is the main organization we've been liaising with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Pauline, is there other hands there? I can't see everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Michael McGlynn would like to come in, and then
Right.
Councillor Chalmers, and Alistair McKinnon also has his hand raised.
Right. Michael, if you'd like to come in on that, please.
Yeah, it's just add a wee bit more colour to Helena's answers there. I think in terms of the school waste, Councillor Allison, and I see Alison's got his hand up, so he can correct me if I've got this wrong, but our ordering system within primary schools and secondary schools seeks to ensure that as best we possibly can, that we make up the meals that are ordered, so any waste is absolutely minimised. And if it's unfortunate if some of the kids don't finish their meals, that's what the waste is, but we try our best to actually minimise the waste through our ordering system. In terms of the uptake of free school meals, it's obviously this year's been exceptional, and it is always a challenge, but I'm sure Alistair will correct me if I've got this wrong, is that through our facilities management team working with head teachers and senior teachers, is that we ensure or seek to ensure that the uptake of that is as high as it possibly is, and making sure that the children get the meal that they're entitled to, but in such a way that it doesn't come across as a free school meal and be stigmatised that way. So it's always a challenge, but I can assure you that between my own team and the Tony McDay's team, we try our best to do that. Alice, I don't know if you got anything to add to that.
No, Michael, you probably you covered everything I was wanting to say. The pre-ordering that we've got in minimises the waste from actual production for meals that are not. And I say we do monitor the waste that's left on the table, but make sure that's properly recycled. And again, as Helena and Michael have both outlined, we are working with education to make sure families are aware that they're entitled to the free school meal. So letters and stuff have been going out and reminders are being going out to try and encourage people to take meals. We do taster sessions and we put promotions out again to try and maximise the uptake of it. As far as your last question concerned, Councillor Alison, we can speak to education directly to get an update on how much actual involvement businesses have had in the schools as far as promoting their certain activities, and we can report that at a future update.
Sorry, can I supplementary, John, just come
Yes,
back?
yes, Alex.
Alice, the way you were saying in the last year, there'll have been very little for obvious reasons regarding interaction. Most of the events I'm aware of were cancelled, as you would expect. And I wasn't actually complaining about the waste. I mean, 1% I feel is a fairly good margin to be working on. To get better than that, you'll be exceptional. But what I'm aware of is, I think is it East Ayrshire make available food that hasn't been utilised during the day to anyone that wants it. Have we considered any programmes like that so that we are not wasting that food?
Again, the fact that we take ordering, we don't actually produce excess meals at the end of the day. But part of the programme that we did through early on through the COVID was that we did look at identifying if there was any spare capacity or any additional items that could be produced, that those would be made available through the schools. So again, that's been discussed through Rhonda's team with the community engagement to see whether there's any further programmes we can put in place to help minimise food poverty.
Thank you.
Right, Maureen.
Thanks, Chair. I just was thinking as we were chatting there that it might be helpful to have some kind of members briefing round about, because there's quite a lot of new stuff round about the regulation of nutritional requirements, the Food for Life programme, what that looks like and how you achieve it. And that would help us kind of consider then making the food pledge, which is down here. So I think it's just that wee bit learning. This is all, well, it's new, or bits of it are new for all of us probably. And it would be good to hear young people's voices in that if we were having a briefing too. So I'm just making that suggestion. Hopefully it would be something that people would welcome.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Yeah, to yourself, Chair, happy to do that. And again, Alistair can correct me if I've got this wrong. The regulations about the changes to the menus within the schools was delayed due to COVID. However, I suspect that they will come back this year. And it is quite some would say a kind of subtle change, but it's quite a significant change in trying to make the menu more healthy and reducing the provision of red meat, for example. And I think that would be probably useful to bring that back to members, because I think as we try and communicate that to parents and children and young people, you say, Councillor Chalmers, it will get a reaction, but hopefully a good reaction. So we'll certainly take that away, Chair, and consider how best to brief members on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Pauline, are there any other hands up?
Councillor McAdams, Chair.
Councillor McAdams.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to say, I second what Maureen said. I think it's really important and I think it'd be really beneficial. So that's brilliant if Michael's going to do that. And the other thing as well was, I think the council should be recognised with regards to what Michael was talking about to do with their menus, for the fact that they have actually, I feel, done a brilliant job at being more inclusivity, or using inclusivity to the best of its advantage for what they did with the menus, so that it was for people that had additional requirements, through whether it was religion or culture, that the council made a really big effort to actually get out to as many people as possible in education for families that were then starting, to make sure that, for people that they could basically have the correct menus, so that it meant for their requirements, whether it was halal or kosher, that it meant that we basically as a council had done a good job opening that up. So I just think that Michael's team should be recognised for that work that they had done as well, because I think that's really important and it's great.
Thanks very much, Monique. I'm sure Michael and his team will appreciate those comments. Is there any other hands up?
No further hands, Chair.
Thanks very much, Pauline. I would then move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thanks very much. If we now move on to item 5, which is the Pesticide Free Council, and it's Ian Gould to speak on this report. And can I thank Robert for sending round the extra booklet. Thanks very much, Robert, for doing that. Right, Ian, can you possibly give us a report on this, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The report is to update members on the work undertaken following the approval of the motion on a pesticide-free council. That mainly covered by noting the increased public concern about the use of pesticides, particularly glyphosate, and the alleged potential damage to health and to biodiversity. Also noting the expiry of glyphosate in December 22 through the European Union. And we were asked to bring a report which specifically looked at spend, use, where it's used, alternative methods, and the implications of being a pesticide-free council. As far as background, just for information, we currently carry out all weed control in-house on all council land. Sections 4.2, 3, 4 and 5 of the report highlight a range of views on the effect of glyphosate, which range from probably carcinogenic to humans from the IARC to other organisations saying there's no link. So what I would say at the moment, there are a range of views, but some of them seem to contradict each other. The one thing that is clear in 4.6 is that the European Union have approved the use and sale of glyphosate until December 22. Sections 4.7, 8 and 9 cover how glyphosate works. I'll leave that for you to read yourselves. But 4.10 and 11, since the motion was raised, we've recently completed a survey to the Scottish Government on weed control. The deadline was the 31st of January, and I'm sort of expecting to hear pretty soon the outcomes of that survey. And linked to the survey, there was the application to join an amenity forum, which has been recognised by the Scottish Government as a mechanism for taking forward all things weed control, if you like, in the country. So we've signed up to that and hoping to hear from them in the near future. The main body of the report starts to cover the areas that were raised, the 4 main topics. The use of glyphosate in section 5, you'll see the table in 5.2, which covers the extent of land that we're responsible for and the frequency of operations of weed control. The one thing I would say is we do not weed kill all areas. We only apply weed killer to the green bits, if you want to call it that. Glyphosate works by working through the leaf and down into the root, so there's no point in spraying it on land that doesn't have weed on it. Section 5.3 covers the quantities and the cost of what we procure. You'll see that makes up £26,000 materials from a figure of about 400,000 for the full process, because obviously that includes labour, transport and other consumables, as well as training. Section 5.5 covers some of the work done to date to reduce the use. It's quite clear in the European Union's extension of the licence that we'll look at how we use it and where we use it, and you'll see there's some areas there where we have reduced applications from 3 to 2. We've reduced where we spray it, for instance, base of trees. More importantly, one of the areas of concern was within playgrounds and schools. We now apply the chemical during holidays so that there's no effect on trying to do this when kids are in. 5.7, quite important to show that all staff are fully trained in the use of applying any sort of chemicals, herbicides, pesticides. Not just the use. What's important to recognise is it's also the storage, the handling, the appropriate PPE. To use the word appropriate. It's not in the report, and because I couldn't find the information. But when you consider the level of use of glyphosate by other households who can buy it off the shelf, if you like, at a garden centre or B&Q, it would have been good to get those sort of figures to try and compare them to what, as a council, we actually use. Section 6 covers a range of alternative methods. Some have tried yourself, some neighbouring authorities have tried. Without getting into too much detail, there seems to be a general consensus that we've not found anything as suitable for dealing with the weed issue, and the costs seem to be higher across the board. But there's also beginning to be an issue on sort of carbon emission, where heat is used in dealing with the weeds. In some cases, we're looking at costs increasing potentially 5-fold. You'll see that in some of the figures that are quoted. So we had tried two alternative products. One was foam-based, and the other was an alternative chemical. But we've also, through the APSE Grounds and Streets Advisory Group, got some information from local authorities who have tried a range of alternative methods. Those include different forms of contact herbicide, thermal treatment, high pressure steam, flame treatment, acetic acid. You'll see within the report that none are really considered appropriate to take forward at this time. However, we'll continue to review what's available in the market. What it does show is that glyphosate at the moment continues to be the most efficient and effective method. However, that's only at the moment. Section 7 sort of covers the next steps. We were asked to see how we go forward. We will, as a service, continue to pilot and assess other alternatives. We'll do that in conjunction with the APSE Grounds and Streets Advisory Group. We'll look at trials through this season using various alternatives, but I would think we need a full growing season to actually see the effectiveness of that, based on some of the information that I've since read up on. We'll also recognise any recommendations coming from the Scottish Government's survey. And similarly, we'll look at the recommendations that come in via the Amenity Forum, which I explained we had just signed up to. And it's intended that we'll come back to committee once we've carried out these trials and basically got the information from various other stakeholders and how we go forward. Other than the training element, there's no other employee implications at the moment. Financially, yeah, there's potentially increased costs if we were to go to a different method. As far as climate change sustainability, yeah, we're working within the recommendations in the Biodiversity Duty Implementation Plan to reduce glyphosate. You'll have seen that based on what we've done to date. I had mentioned the carbon emissions through the potential to use heat, whether that's water, foam, steam, or even burning the weeds. That's something that we'll need to factor in to any future decisions on going forward. Suppose in summary, we continue to use an approved product at the moment. The evidence of risk is contradictory at best. There are potential costs with the alternatives. We are committed to continuing to test the market and consult on best practice. And referring back to section 2 in the report, we just ask that the report's noted, but also that we seek agreement on particularly the next steps in section 7. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ian, for that report. I'm going to ask colleagues if they've got any questions of Ian.
Aye, John.
Can I ask Pauline to give me them in order as they appear?
Thank you. Councillor Craig, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Brown, Councillor Lockhart, and I did hear Councillor.
Right, don't go any.
No, I'll just start with Councillors Craig and Loudon.
Councillor
Craig and Loudon.
Councillor Craig, Peter, if you can come in first.
Well, thanks very much, Chair.
I have to say a big thank you to Ian for that report. It's a very factual report, and it's been pretty well researched. So you've obviously spent some time doing that. Yeah. But I also know that you're constantly looking at this problem. I've had conversations with ground services in the past few years on this. So I know you're constantly looking at that. And I'm really pleased to see that we've joined with the APSI and the Scottish Government's campaign to get more information on that. So that's great. I'd also thank Robert for including that pamphlet that he sent out to all of us. I would point out that the majority of examples in the leaflet that Robert put out were all inner city examples: Hackney, Hammersmith and Fulham, which, with the greatest respect, are not South Lanarkshire. South Lanarkshire is one of the biggest rural areas in Scotland, and the move from urban to countryside is quite a big one. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that, where paths or streets in the urban areas are well walked. That in itself is a weed killer. It keeps weeds down, whereas in the rural areas, the long distances between travel means that those paths are less widely trodden. In the rural areas, there's a lot of seeds in the wind, which carry and seed naturally in bankings and pavements and cracks, which you don't really have. So there's a couple of small examples of how the differences can occur. The paper itself, the leaflet that Robert put out, wasn't entirely without merit. However, I wouldn't like to say that that was the case. One particularly interesting part of that paper was to do with the doing nothing option, which I think as we move forward in the years to come will be an option that we will be taking, because not only does it help the biodiversity, it also helps reduce the amount of weed killer that we use. Now that's obviously a bit of a controversial option, because you know, I noted during the first lockdown, quite a few of my colleagues in East Kilbride were a bit apoplectic about grass cutting and those kind of things. But I think that there is real merit in that. Also, it did tend to make some claims without backing them up with some scientific evidence, which is always a bit suspect.
Get him off.
Councillor Lowe, we can hear you.
All right, that's good.
Could you
I
mute
thought
your
it was going
microphone,
on all day.
please?
John fell asleep.
Could you mute your microphone, please, Councillor Lowe? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe, for that intervention. Now, the response in the report that we've got in front of us talks about the European Food Safety Agency and the European Chemical Agency, and it talks about other countries throughout the world having studied glyphosate and found there be no link to cancer. Now, this has been a chemical that's been used for the last 40 years, and it's been common use all over the world. And all those agencies not being able to find a link is quite significant. However, the one agency that did make the link is the IARC, and the obvious question is why. Having done some research, it's quite easy to find newspaper articles on how this could have happened. And I would quote Kate Cleland's report for Reuters on October the 19th, 2007. And that was headed the World Health Organization Cancer Agency edited out non-carcinogenic findings. Or even Matt Ridley in the Times newspaper headed the glyphosate scandal, and that was published on Monday the 23rd of October. And the subheading, "Bounty hunting lawyers lie behind the distortion of science." Now, all these safety agencies have never had a problem with telling us what causes cancer. Red meat can cause cancer. Coffee can cause cancer. Alcohol can cause cancer. And that to me is what used to be a good night out. So I don't see why other agencies would not be telling us if that was the fact. So scientific evidence is the key to this. And if the scientific evidence isn't there, then we have to say to the people we represent, why would we be spending huge amounts of money on other forms of weed control without any particular reason to do so? So,
Peter, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to wind up soon. Okay.
Right. Okay. So that's me. I'm almost finished, Chair. But I'm really happy to see that we as a council are investigating other avenues, because I think that's important. And I'm really happy with the report that Ian's brought in. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. The reason I'm allowing comments and debate in this, it's a very important issue. So the idea is that people should have a chance to put forward their views on it. And I would ask Katie now to come in.
Thanks very much, Chair. First of all, I want to echo Peter's thanks to Ian for going through that with us today, and then for obviously all of the work that sits behind it and all of the efforts that have been put in. I'd like to ask a few questions about a specific problem of Japanese knotweed, which, if you're not familiar with, it's like a highly invasive species, and it can cause property damage, foundation damage, and so on. So if you've had a home report or anything like that recently, you'll see it specifically mentioned because of that potential. And there's a sort of belt of it that runs across the country, and then there's sort of hotspots in particular areas. I know there was a hotspot in Burnside a few years ago that had made the local paper, and so on. Anyway, I see it's mentioned in section 4.8, almost like a sort of outlier, like a kind of special type of weed, which glyphosate is effective against. And then when we go down to 6.2, isn't it, the discussion on alternative methods, there isn't any sort of mention that it might need to be treated differently. Then again, thank you, Councillor Brown, for sending through that report yesterday. So the report that Robert sent mentioned Japanese knotweed specifically, and it outlines two solutions. So one was sort of injecting these traditional formulas, if you will, straight into the roots. And then there was an alternative method which was mentioned of using some sort of mesh you put over the top, which will eventually cut the stem. But it was noted that that was very slow, and obviously that's not really what you want when it's something that can potentially cause damage. So with all of that in mind, sort of related questions, Ian, where have the alternative methods that have been mentioned in 6.2, have they been trialled on knotweed specifically? Have they been effective? If so, and is there a concern about how it could be managed if we are going down the roads of using alternative methods? Thanks.
Thanks. Ian?
Yeah, I would first say that the alternative methods have not been tried, but based on, and thanks Robert for sending through the document, it was quite informative. We are already using a stem injection system. It's not a blanket spray through a knapsack, which is your sort of run-of-the-mill normal way to deal with weeds. Japanese knotweed, we inject straight into the stem at the back end of the year, which allows I'm going to use a big word, it allows the weed killer to be translocated down into the root and kills the root. There you go. That's my bit of science for today. However, Japanese knotweed in particular, you need to be aware that if we're not treating it on site, there are some serious implications about taking it off site and how you dispose of it, to the fact that there's even recommendations that you burn it on site so you're not taking it away, and obviously risking the transfer of the seed, if you like, onto other ground. So as it stands at the moment, yeah, when we try out alternative methods in the summer, we will look at that. But at the moment, we are using sort of what the report that Robert sent through says, is we're using the stem injection system.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. You okay with that, Kate? Right, Robert, I think you're up now.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to Ian for the report as well. Make the observation first of all about Japanese knotweed. I don't think most of us would have taken the view that it was inappropriate to use glyphosate or similar substances to deal with Japanese knotweed. That's clearly a very specific kind of problem, and I think even the reports from Pesticide UK and others accept, if you like, that there will be the need to do that sort of thing. So maybe put that to one side. I wonder if we can get the start point, though, because although I'm indebted to Councillor Craig for the scientific analysis that he's given us, I'm not quite sure what his qualifications are for this, but never mind, that's another issue. Suffice to say on that, I think there's controversy behind all this. There's a number of different views, but I'd like to get the start point. And it seems to me the start point is, first of all, why do the various reports require us and encourage us to reduce the use of glyphosate if there are not perceived problems? And that, I think, is the biodiversity reports of various kinds, the licensing provision for the 2017 permission from the European Union, which told us to reduce or eliminate the use in parks and schools and various other places like that. So it seems to me that the start point is that regardless of the precise ins and outs of the worries about the thing, people who know these things take the view that it's not desirable to have increasing amounts of glyphosate going into the ecosphere, so to speak. Now, the second point is, where are we at present? Now, I wonder if I can ask Ian specifically, we're talking in the report about the reduction of the use of glyphosate, but I have information from Pesticide UK who've done an environmental impact information request, who tell me that despite this aim, the volume of glyphosate applied in South Lanarkshire has increased since 2016. I wondered if Ian could comment on that, first of all, and tell me if that's the case or not.
I'm not a party to the report that says we've increased the use. I would actually say that it should be the other way. There are issues, Robert, around weather. We quite clearly don't spray in the rain. We don't spray in certain weather conditions, such as when it's too windy because of the level of drift. So I would say that there will be variables each year in the levels that we use. However, the figures I've gave are the 2019 figures that I provided on request to the Scottish Government through the survey. I'm quite happy to go back further and look, but I would say that weather will play a big part. I've seen seasons where we effectively stop grass cutting, weed killing at the end of August because the weather dictates that we just can't get on the ground. But in other years, we're seeing where there's maybe an Indian summer, if you want to call it that, where we continue to spray further into the year because the growth keeps going forward, if you like.
That's quite an important point, isn't it? Which is that the use of glyphosate is weather dependent, and Scottish weather, to say the least, is a bit variable in that connection. My point, though, is just as you're looking at the context, is the information I've given, and it's certainly from an information request made to the council, is that we actually haven't made much progress since 2016 in reducing the use of glyphosate. Second point I'd like to ask, though, is just moving on from that. I'm slightly disappointed in one respect that there's no kind of analysis of the difference between different sort of areas in terms of what we might be able to do here, because I think that we'd perhaps share the objective of reducing it. What we do in parks, what we do on roads. Peter's point about, or Katie's point about rural areas, Peter's point, I think it was about rural areas, obviously valid, but there's nothing to stop us adopting a different approach in different parts of the area. That's not a definitive sort of viewpoint. Has Ian had a look at, or the department had a look at, those councils, for example, the ones that I mentioned in the report, or areas like Cambridge, which have in fact committed themselves to a glyphosate-free objective, as to how they're actually going about this and whether there's any lessons we can learn from that? Because there's quite a lot of councils are doing that, and I think the report really rather concentrates on those that aren't, rather than giving us some guidance about where we can go if we want to actually go down the direction of reducing the thing. What information have we got from these councils as to how they've done it?
Well, the first thing I would say, I've only actually seen the report coming through in the last few days, so my opportunity to go and interrogate what other authorities down south are doing is very limited. What I would say is that the information I received from West Lothian and from East Renfrewshire came from two guys I trust, two guys I respect. I would accept at face value what they've provided me with. But slightly echoing what Peter said, the report itself makes some, I'll just find who, Hackney, for instance, yeah, they're quoted as a good example, but they've only reduced their number of sprays from 4 to 3. Well, we've actually went from 3 to 2. So, whilst quite clearly we will look this year through various trials of different methods, and we will go back to some of those that we've tried previously. And it may be the case, similar to, I think, what East Renfrewshire found, that there was a limited opportunity on hard standing, for instance, slabs and paths, to use, I think it was either foam or flame. So there may be horses for courses in this, Robert, and that will obviously come through the trials this year.
No, I think I accept that. Sorry, I want to come to some suggestions at the end, but if I can just pursue this slightly, if I may, Chair, for the moment. Looking at the kind of different areas, I mean, we've got, for example, the recommendation from the European Union license that we should try and reduce or eliminate it in parks, playgrounds, near health centres, places like that. And I just wonder if there's anything we can do, because the usage there is much less on anybody's account. The start point is easier. Are there methods we can use to actually reduce the usage there specifically, and perhaps get rid of it in some instances? It might maybe be a bit easier to apply in the first instance.
That will come through the trials in the summer, Robert. I think we're now at a point where we will probably spend a fair chunk of the summer trying out different options, different alternative methods, and seeing where they're suitable and where they're not. To say what would be suitable just now really doesn't do me any favours, because I'm going to then need to come back and try and readdress that if it wasn't successful. So I think I've got to be given the opportunity to try and see and come back and report and just see how things go. But quite clearly, we have took actions to reduce, and we have looked at where we're spraying it. And as I say, linked to the Biodiversity Officer's implementation plan, Louisa works along with myself, and we work quite closely with her, a range of things that will improve biodiversity, and one of those is decreasing the use of glyphosate or chemicals.
Because we've had a go, haven't we, with green flag parks and things in Strave and Cambuslang, where presumably we have in fact managed to eliminate or reduce the use of glyphosate. Otherwise, there wouldn't be green flag parks. Have we not got some experience from there within our own council on it?
Well, I would slightly not take offence. We've had green flag for the best part of 5, 6, 7 years, Robert. So yeah, we've been doing this for a while. We're not just having a go. We work very closely with the groups in the parks. We have reduced the use of chemical, but we've also reduced grass cutting to implement wildflower areas. So there's a whole range of things there that we've recognised and took action on. We still use glyphosate in those parks. That's a matter of fact. The fact that we slightly reduced it helps the overall position. Yeah, I fully agree with that, because there is a sort of general consensus that we should be looking to reduce this for various reasons. But I feel that we've actually went a distance in trying to do that, while still trying to provide a service out there where people don't want to be falling over weeds in the streets.
Chair, I'll come back if I may at the end with some points. I
think that's advisable, Robert, if you've got some suggestions to make. Can I bring in, before we go any further with anybody else, can I bring Michael in, and then we can continue with any other colleagues' questions? Michael.
I'll keep it brief, Chair. I think the first things first is that the product is licensed, is approved to use. However, having said that, there's clearly a movement to look either to reduce it or remove it as a product that the council could use. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debate. I think we'll obviously learn lessons from other councils, and I was picking this up with Ian yesterday. Our English counterparts, they have a slightly different climate, they have different weather conditions, particularly down south. And I would suggest we'll still speak to them, but the reference group I think we should pay most attention to is this group that Ian has mentioned within the report, and that the Scottish Government recognise as well. And I think that's probably where we'll then learn best practice. And I think it's from that, and I think Ian's alluded to it, we'll do the trials, we'll learn from colleagues, and then we will report back. And that's essentially what Section 7 is about, Chair. So I think that's really where we should kind of focus our consideration just now. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Michael. Pauline, could you tell me who is next?
Councillor Lockhart, Chair, and then Councillor Convery.
Right, thanks very much. Councillor Lockhart, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't know whether I add much to the debate or not, but I mean, obviously, what Ian has said, I think is a very well-balanced report. He's the one in the hot seat, and I think he's the one with the experience, if you like, of being asked to use the different methods. Now, the reality seems to be from the reports, and Robert's report is also interesting, is it's almost coming from different directions, and I feel, as usual, we're sitting in the place where ideals, as so often, part company with reality. And although it's, the right thing is obviously to be pushing in a certain direction, I think you have to accept the limitations of where we are. And the only number that stood out to me, apart from 5,200 kilometers of roadside, which they have to look after, remember, and how the hell are you going to heat that or burn it or hot foam, all that sort of stuff? It's complete rubbish. That's where reality parts company. And I frankly think that what we've got to look at is the imperative, if you like, of having to try and get there. But at a time when we've got almost no money, and every time I look up, I'm being asked to cut yet another thing from the budget, the other figure that stood out to me was it currently costs 400,000 to do what we're doing, and it's likely to cost 2 million to run around with hot flames and people on their knees weeding all the bits because you just don't like glycophosphate or whatever it is. Reality, come on, reality, that's what we've got to look at, aiming in the right direction. But I do think that at the moment, this is almost beginning to move towards what I call the Greta Thunberg effect. It's a great idea, but the world has to get on, and I've no doubt in due course, science will invent a better weed killer, a less damaging weed killer, and we've got to look forward to that rather than just to change everything and throw everything up in the air at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Jerry?
Very quickly, Chair, just following on from what Richard said there, I'm not an expert. I thank Ian for a very comprehensive report there. It was very balanced. But I go back to 4.2, and to me, this is the key thing. In March 2015, the World Health Organization, and they said probably it was carcinogenic. Now, I would like an update for the World Health Organization. I'm glad the Scottish Government have set up this committee and we'll move forward, as Michael McGlynn said, on that. But at the end of the day, Chair, anything that causes cancer is no pie in the sky. We got to cut it out. And if it means spending money, well, I'm sorry, we need to spend money to stop cancer. That's the bottom line. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Pauline, could you tell me who's next?
Chair, Councillor Allison and Councillor Nealon after that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Allison.
Thanks, John. Just to what Jerry was saying, the update is that they have not been able to prove that as of yet. That is why the glyphosate has not been banned. There is a fear that it may be carcinogenic. They cannot find any proof as of yet. What I was going on to say is just thank Ian very much, because that is a very comprehensive report. And the greatest thing to come out of it is the fact that it's a very, very complex situation on how to take forward. It can't be dealt with by council motions, etc. And that is where we've gone wrong just now. It's all about feelings rather than fact. I tried to express it at the council meeting and I made a bad job of it. I have, in my farming life, not using chemicals. That does not mean to say you just stop, because there are consequences. You need to look through these and manage how you can do these types of things. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. What I would ask Ian to do is also to investigate the ongoing consequences of doing different things, abandoning any work. What does that do to the way the place looks? Does it encourage more litter dropping? Does it? It's not just if you're affecting the balance of nature, it's not just good things that come in. What bad things happen? Does it affect ticks? If you're suddenly out walking with your dog and you end up getting a tick on it because we have changed the atmosphere. Katie highlighted the issues with Japanese knotweed. Ragwort's another one. It is a highly complex issue that cannot be dealt with straightforward. I'm pleased to see what Ian has done to date. It seems to be in front of actually what Robert was actually asking for in many ways, and would encourage him to keep working along these lines to get effective remedies. Because if we don't need to use chemicals, that's a good thing. But it needs to be effective. Otherwise, all you're doing is passing motions at council and doing nothing.
Thanks much for that contribution, Alec. Lynn? Lynn, you may be muted, Lynn.
Councillor Nealon? Councillor Nealon's hand has gone down. Councillor
Right.
Anderson and then Councillor Brown.
Right, Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. My only issue with the report, I think it's a very comprehensive report, Fian, and Ian and I both sit at APSI meetings where this has been discussed many times, and APSI have yet again put out a request to all councils to see if MD's come up with the silver bullet to resolve this issue of glyphosate. But my issue really is with 4.6, and where it's saying that the licence commenced in 2017 for a period of 5 years. It has been agreed at a UK level, which technically means that it would run out in 2022, which is next year. But if I can just read a wee bit here, that speaking at a Virtual British Crop Production Council, Darren Flynn, head of Active Substances Delivery for the Chemical Regulation Divisions, explained that all active substances due to expire between the 1st of January 2021 and the 31st of December 2023 would be granted a 3-year extension under the new GB pesticide regulations. Now, that is because when the 2017, we used to be members of the European Union. We are not members of the European Union anymore, unfortunately, and that means the expiry date now, because of Brexit, it will be December 2025 in Great Britain. So there's no need to rush this. We don't need to have it done by 2022. There's a 3-year extension, and I'd like the reports to reflect that is a European directive, and we are no longer members of the European Union. Thanks to the Tories.
Thanks for that contribution and the information, John. I see that Lynn had temporary problems with internet. If Lynn's back in and she still wishes to speak, I'll bring her in now.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity again, John. Don't know what happened there. Just on sort of weed killers and weed treatment, I don't think one size fits all. There are probably a variety of ways that we'll be looking at going forward. But communities come together on an ad hoc basis for things like gritting or litter picking, etc. Is there any scope to mobilise communities or community groups to go out and weed locally going forward post-COVID, do you think?
Sorry, I'll bring Ian in on that, and then I think Michael, and then I think we've had a fair crack at this, Whip, and probably bring back in Robert, because I think he may have some things he wants to put forward. So Ian and then Michael.
It's not something in the report, Councillor Nealon, but it's something we can consider. I did see it was mentioned in Robert's report from the Pesticide Action Network. I'm just not convinced that we would get the level of support we need, and it may end up being very much piecemeal. However, that's not to say we wouldn't look at it. It may be more appropriate in some of the more rural areas. However, maybe that's not the case. Maybe some of our more active groups would be keen to take part. So definitely something we would look at going forward.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. Did you want to add anything, Michael? Are you okay?
The points before, and I suspect Robert Brown, Councillor Brown is going to come in just at the back of me there. It's just that this report has, I think, answered the motion's task as we put it in the report. We've got further work to do, and this discussion has been very helpful to help direct areas that we need to consider and then report back to a future committee. I think picking up Councillor Nealon's point is Ian's team works very closely with the community, but I think with particularly grounds maintenance and weed killing, it has to be done on a systematic and consistent basis across the council area, as opposed to one-off cleanups, if I can put it that way. But of course, I'd be happy to discuss and work with any community groups. That's all, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much. If colleagues are quite happy, I'll bring in Robert, because I think Robert's got some ideas he wants to put forward, and then we'll move to a conclusion. Robert.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I think it has been a useful debate. I mean, I've never said from the beginning of this debate that this was a thing without either costs or difficulties in terms of the options, which is why I think we'd always talked in terms of phasing it in and having a target and all of that, which I'm still keen to sort of do. We've got, I think, one or two suggestions in the course of the debate, which I think echo things that have been said before. Firstly, on Lynn's point about volunteer groups. That was a point I made in the debate before, and it arose from my conversations with Grow 73 in the Camglen area, who have got a biodiversity corridor project at the moment, which they're keen to take forward. And I think one of the aspects of that might be that on the roads and pavements around that particular bit, that they would look at the question of eliminating glyphosate and weed killer sort of use. So I think there's potential for doing that, but I don't pretend that's anything more than a sort of a small bit, if you like, of the whole operation. But I would actually ask Ian or whoever the appropriate people are in his department to liaise with groups like Grow 73, and there's a greening network in Cambuslang, Rotherham as well, I'm sure in other areas as well, who I think will be able to move this particular agenda forward. So that's the first point, that we actually should look at the community links thing. The second thing is, I think Ian's undertaken already to have a bit of a closer look at what councils who are heading in this direction or saying they are in fact actually doing, and how they're going about it and what the success rate is, because I think that's information we could be actually having a look at. Thirdly, I think there's some suggestion in various reports that we can do things by redesigning areas to make them less attractive to weeds. Now, again, that's a sort of slow process, if you like, but I am struck by the fact that a lot of the information about this is not about how you actually get rid of weeds at the end of the day. It's how you prevent them arising in the first place on, for the sake of argument, urban pavements, taking up the original point, where a lot of it's to do with broken asphalt, gaps between slabs and things of that kind. Now, sometimes, and also for that matter, the fact that some of the drains need attention, and you've got a kind of good weed bed support along the gutters of many of the actual roads in residential areas. Now, some of that can be dealt with or improved by slightly different issue of how we tackle blocked drains, street sweeping things, and all of that in that kind of way. And I think there are methods of doing things along those lines that are worth having a closer look at. The further point, I think, is to do with the question of just the area. It's absolutely valid that it's different in the many miles of roads in the rural areas to what it is in the urban areas, or for that matter in parks. And I wonder, in the course of further work on this, if we can perhaps look at this by sector to a much greater extent and come back on that. There's a suggestion from the pesticide group that putting details of the council's weed control policy on the website is quite useful in terms of informing the public about what we're up to in that connection. And then finally, I think we should be coming back with a report on this, maybe in 6 months' time, when there's been further work done on both the summer episodes that Ian's been talking about, some of the further investigations, and perhaps some of this other kind of stuff, not eliminating the idea of pilot schemes where appropriate, to see if we can do things particularly forward in that direction. So I hope that's a helpful input to the kind of direction I'd like to see. I've got some sympathy with Alex's point that you can't sort this by way of council motion. It's more complicated than that, and therefore I'm not being particularly precise in terms of what I'm suggesting about the way forward on it.
Thanks, Robert. I think a number of things you've said there could be noted, but if I take colleagues back to item 7, next steps, that really does take up an awful lot of what you're saying there, and talks about us waiting to the review of the findings of the Scottish Government weed control survey and other things in there. Also, our active participation in the amenity forum will give us some upgrade in that as well. So, I mean, obviously, I would like your points noted, but as I say, what I would probably like to do now is move to recommendations. And if there's no one otherwise minded, I would move the recommendations.
Chair, I was going to come in on, I was waiting until Robert.
Oh, sorry, Joe, I didn't see your hand there.
Okay, I put it up late because I was waiting for to hear what Robert's suggestions were. I have to say, I don't have any great issue with them, but can I come into this point about the volunteer groups? I was going to come in earlier and I decided not to, but it's just this, I think what Robert was describing there was where we've got community projects on the go, certainly they could do more to reduce sort of pesticide use where they're working on the ground. But there were points made in that debate, in that discussion around climate, and almost, and this is the point I want to make absolutely clear, it relates to so many other issues that are topical just now, but we cannot use climate change and this desire to reduce our use of a particular pesticide as a Trojan horse for cuts to frontline jobs and frontline services. Ultimately, our public areas are still going to have to be maintained. And I do think if that means, and right now a lot of places that would have received a more intense service now would receive a spray, and that spray is being reduced. But if there are going to be implications to reducing the use of a particular pesticide, and we want to continue to provide a service to the standard that the community expects, that may well require additional investment, and it may well require additional workforce. So I would just want to make that point absolutely clear. I'm nothing wrong with what is being proposed in the sense that yes, if bits of the community can do more, but what I do have a concern with is replacing a statutory service or a public service, as I think I'm conscious we're seeing in some other areas, with how do I put it, with a voluntary, with an ambition around a voluntary commitment that may not materialise.
Yeah, your views are noted, Joe. Thanks very much. Right, I'm going to move to the recommendation. Add
Chair, can I simply add to that, if I may, that I wonder if you'd agree to a report coming back in, say, 6 months' time on this, trying to look at it by sector slightly more than what we've got at the moment. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, I've got no problem with a report coming back in 6 months' time and letting us know just exactly where we stand with some of the conclusions that have been drawn in the recommendations. Robert, Michael?
Yeah, just to confirm, prior to this meeting, we discussed it with Ian and Alistair, and coincidentally, we were also thinking of a 6-month period because that'll take us towards the tail end of the summer. So just to confirm, for what it's worth, happy with that, Chair?
Yep. You're happy with that, Robert? Okay.
Fine, thank you very much.
Right.
So I'll just second your proposal there, Chair.
Thanks very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much, everyone. That was a good discussion. Let's move on to item 8, which is the development of the litter strategy. And I would ask Emma Berry to give us a report on this, please.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, I'm putting forward the proposed plan for the development of a litter strategy covering the period 2022 to 2027. The main focus is prevention rather than cure through the development of a range of new plans, preventative action, education, community involvement and engagement. The litter strategy for South Lanarkshire Council comes from the review of the Code of Practice on Litter and Refuge, COPLAR, by the Scottish Government in 2018. COPLAR provides practical guidance on fulfilling the duties set out in the Environmental Protection Act 1990. The review and update aligned with the National Litter Strategy towards a litter-free Scotland, with an emphasis on the role of prevention. Moving to Section 4, the strategy will cover the period 2022 to 2027 and propose a vision for the development of a range of plans, policies, actions and environmental initiatives that drive our commitment to preventing litter, dog fouling and fly tipping, among other things. It will also set out the objectives, outputs, activities and the expected outcomes for the Council, its partners and its communities. The strategy will include consultation with internal stakeholders as well as key external stakeholders and education institutions. Each council resource will be required to contribute to the strategy through the creation of a litter prevention action plan that recognises the role that each resource can play. Section 4.8 lists the proposed timeline and provides the next steps for the development of the strategy. Final drafts will be submitted at the start of 2022 with a proposed launch in April 2022. Despite the delay due to COVID-19 in presenting this strategy proposal, the range of actions have already taken place. These are component parts of the overall strategy and I'll briefly highlight them. However, the full details can be found in Section 5. Rezoning and publication of streets. We were the first council to publish the rezoning information when we uploaded it last year, and the mapping is available in the public map gallery titled Litter Zones. Litter bin review mapping. We have over 4,000 litter bins in South Lanarkshire Council and a review of the existing litter bin provision is nearing its completion. This is including essential information like type, model, capacity, condition of the bin, whether it's got a hood or a lid, and this information will allow us to make and evidence changes going forward to that infrastructure. Litter campaign, developed with PR for parks, green spaces and school routes. It's also on 8 of our waste service refuge collection vehicles and it had a successful social media campaign with an animation. Fly tipping mapping and heat maps, providing effective visual representation that displays patterns, heat maps and brings emphasis to the hotspots for fly tipping. There is example maps in Appendix 2 of the document. Partnership working. Ground Services has been working closely with other departments and partnership and cooperation is really going to be a significant part of this strategy. Awareness of fly tipping on social media. Fly tipping, as you all be aware, is a wide-ranging problem that is affecting different areas differently all over South Lanarkshire. We are wanting to increase the awareness of the negative effects on health, well-being and the environment, and financial information is also being used on social media to highlight how much it's actually costing the council. Clean up road closures. We've been working with PR and we last year promoted the road closures on social media a few days before they occurred, apologising with the reason, and then a thank you message was posted after with a photo of the litter collected. This worked really well and is increasing the awareness of roadside litter, and it's something we are doing at the moment and will continue to do. And just to finish on, the proposal document finishes with listing the assessments and implications. However, I'm not going to go into those details because they're listed in the document. I want to finish by saying that the strategy needs your support, buy-in and involvement. We need all levels and departments of the council and elected members involved and the staff really to help drive this commitment to focus on the prevention aspects. I'll now refer back to Section 2 to ask for the approval of the proposed plan for the development of a litter strategy with the timescale that's set out in Section 4.8. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma, for that report. It's quite a substantial report. I'm sure that we'll have some questions on it. Can I bring in Michael McGlynn first?
Chair, I actually think it's Monique McAdams for this.
Oh, is it? Right. So all I can see is Sorry about that.
Sorry,
Monique.
Chair, it's Councillor McAdams, Councillor Brown and Councillor Shearer.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair. Emma, it's a brilliant report. You've obviously put an immense amount of work into it and it's greatly appreciated. I warmly welcome point 5, point 3, and I know you've done a lot of work on that, and I think that's actually going to make a really big difference in the community. Also, I'm dying to get back out when we can actually, do organised litter picks, and the ones with Keep Scotland Beautiful, they work really well, and I'll definitely have a team of people that will be looking to do that, because I get people emailing me all the time saying, when can we actually get out and litter pick? So I think that's a really look forward to when we can actually start, doing that again. But do you know what I wanted to ask though? See in point 3.7, we talk about Copler. Do you actually think that it makes a difference? And I'm going to give you an example why. See, when we go into further talk about the dumping on private land, like I know that we occasionally go, as a gesture of goodwill or whatever, out with obviously the environmental aspect of it in regards to like disease or whatever else, and we pick up because if there's like a major trouble spot. But I don't think, unless you tell me differently, that the Copler actually works. I think it's more a tick box exercise, because the dumping's still happening in the private lands, and there doesn't really seem to be any proper recourse that we can actually go down to actually stop it, which means it always ends up coming back on us as a local authority to then basically like have extra costs. So do you think that the Copler works?
I do think that Copler works. I do agree with what you're saying about the fact that it's difficult to have an approach impact when it is on private land, because if it's not attracting additional vermin, or it's not, as you say, items that need to be moved for a health and safety reason, then it's just really what we need to be doing as a council and through environmental services and other departments is trying to work with these private landowners to say, okay, we know that you're having a problem with fly tipping. Again, it's happening on council land, it's happening on private land, and see if we can do something to prevent or mitigate that. So some things that have been discussed with private landowners is using bollards to restrict access. Again, it depends on the type of access, it depends on the type of private land, but it's really trying to think, okay, it's going to be a better option than either us continually having the issue of trying to help with these private land clearances, or the private landowner ultimately been fit by the fine, not the fine, sorry, the costs that they incur from it. I do think that the litter strategy for Scotland and Copler combined do need to be updated, and hopefully the litter strategy for Scotland will be in the coming year. But yeah, I think they definitely have a benefit been there, if just to have that sort of legal responsibility and side to it as well.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Just very quickly, there's a lot of good stuff in this report. I appreciate the strategy going forward. I wonder, though, if there's a need for what you might describe as a crash programme towards the end of the COVID thing, both on litter and on dog fouling, both of which, if my experience in my area is right, seem to have kind of escalated quite significantly during the lockdown. And I wonder, when we're in a position to have more staff put onto this kind of thing and all that, whether we should have a programme that actually tackles this. Some of the stuff is Monique's thing about litter picking groups and volunteers and all that. I think there's a lot of part can be played about that. Part of it's to do with the dog fouling stuff, which has got, I think, out of hand. And I had an exchange with Michael's department about that earlier on. And we have, of course, had the Wanted programme and things in the past. Can we have a look at the potential for a crash programme of that, if that's the right word, to look at these kind of things coming out of lockdown to try and restore standards, so to speak? Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thanks very much, Robert. I think it's David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's a good strategy, but like all strategies, it needs buy-in from the public. I think that's absolutely critical, because going forward, we need to try and prevent litter from happening rather than just reacting to the fact that it's been dropped. and it's how do we get that buy-in is the big question. I would also say that we need publicity. So when the council does do litter picks, and I am long enough in the tooth to remember being involved in, certainly when Jerry was the chair of that department many, many years ago, we had elected members taking part in litter picks, which was heavily publicised, and that seemed to have some effect at the time. I would like to see something like that coming back, but we also have to have not just the carrot, but we have to have the stick. We have to have, where there is fly tipping and we can identify somebody, the fines have to be imposed, and I would publicise the fact that people are being fined, so name and shame. So I don't know if the officers want to come back on that. Thanks.
Thanks, David. I think I noticed Michael had his hand up. I was correct, Michael? Do you want to come in before we continue?
Yeah, that's fine. Chair, so maybe picking up on Councillor Brown's point and also Councillor Shearer, just a general point about the publicity side of this is that, and the officers will know what I'm about to say. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Producing the strategies is one thing, but I genuinely believe it's the process of producing the strategy, the publicity, how we try and engage with our communities, that that's about changing their behaviours, taking civic pride, and there'll always be exceptions to that. So I think the actual process of producing the strategy, and Emma's kind of highlighted within the report, the stages, the community consultation and engagement, importantly, we would hope to make some inroads in that. And clearly, I'm not setting up Lynn Sherry for later on, but we need to do that with education colleagues as well, around our skills, which is obviously a hotspot. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Shearer, it's just the publicity of it and continuing to highlight this. And to be fair, within the report, even while bringing this forward to the committee has been delayed, there has been a lot of action, some PR around the use of the term Egypt and things like that, which is usually, you know, hopefully resonates with our communities. But I think going back to segue into Councillor Brown's point, we'll always target where we've got intelligence that there is particular issues. And I think anecdotally there has been an increase in the number of people owning dogs, and that may result in some irresponsible behaviour. So as we move out of COVID, hopefully, we will look at that on a case-by-case basis, and that will also be litter as well. But I think over and above that, the process of producing the strategy, the consultation, the engagement, the PR will be absolutely crucial to actually try and make a difference. And I think we've all got a collective responsibility, and I think that's what Emma's last point was. We all need to buy into this, we need to champion it, etc. So, sorry, Chair, a kind of long-winded answer there, but it is something which I think most people have got kind of close to their heart. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Michael. Pauline, can you tell me who's next on?
Yes, Chair, we have a large number of hands. We've got Councillor Convery and also Councillor Miller after him.
Right, okay. Jerry?
Thanks very much, Chair. Chair, I'm not going to be trying, I'm trying to do my best here not to be negative, but I've seen this for 26 years. We have all these fancy ideas. We've done it, as David Shearer said, we've done it for years. We get education involved, we talk to ourselves, we do this, we do that. The bottom line's quite simple. I can see a massive deterioration in the state of South Lanarkshire as regards to litter and fly tipping. It's getting worse and worse. And I'll say it, we're a dirty nation. I lived in Canada for years. We're a dirty nation. We're a throwaway nation. And I've got to say, and I've got to be critical here, I don't, for the love of me, in this document here, 3.8, where it says, this recognises that the continued use of resources for street cleaning and operations is not suitable and no longer appropriate. Well, of course it's appropriate, because without being political, Chair, there's another document in circulation at this present time. It's called the Savings Package, where if we endorse some of the rubbish that's in it, £797,000 worth of savings we take 33 jobs out the equation that pick up litter and get rid of fly tipping. We're in a crisis, and it's all down to people. We're not getting enough people to do the litter. We've paid off over 100 operatives over the years, and these people are still needed. They're needed more now than they were ever needed. It's not being critical, Emma, or anybody else. Everybody is trying to do their best. We see this, we have a flight, we have a litter picking day and the community get involved. It's not the community that is going to solve the problem. It's us putting resources where they're needed to make this a nice place to stay. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for your comments. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, I really welcome this report. And I was interested in 4.1 with the dog fouling. I would agree with Robert, my colleague. It's increased greatly. It's absolutely horrible. 4.3, as far as education institutions, I know this is a real tough one because I know that the schools have been working hard, to try and do. Teachers have actually, I've got one high school in my ward, Calder Glen, and I know that teachers go down in the afternoon. I'd heard constituents moaning about the litter, and I'd never seen it. I'd come in from work at night, popped down to the shops, and everything was clean. I went down when the schools went back, and I was like, oh my God, it was like a tsunami of litter. And it's our guys will go in, whoosh, clean it up. And that's why it always looks beautiful. I always thought, I don't know why they're complaining. And, it's actually the high school pupils. It doesn't happen at the primary schools. And I don't know what it is. It's like they go to high school, they lose their brain, and as Jenny says, they become so dirty. And I think, put a camera in, find the parents. But, it's a tough one. But thanks, Chair.
Thanks for those comments. Who's next?
Chair, Councillor Callaghan, then Councillor Wardhall.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Emma for the report. Really, really good report there. I'm also looking at 5.4 and talking about schools. Glad this is one high school in their area. I've got two secondary schools. We've got Hamilton Grammar, which is a town centre, and Holy Cross High School as well. And you can see, the impact that school littering makes, especially in Bothwell Road Park and in Hamilton Town Centre. It really is quite dramatic. As Gladys said, our council officers are amazing. They're in there and they swoop in quickly and it's all cleared up. So it's very, very occasionally that catch sight of it there. Now, Jerry brought up the idea there that, we're a really dirty nation, spoke about Canada and how things were quite different there. So what I'd like to ask are, do we have some specific plans around other things that we can be doing that will encourage our young people not to be dropping litter, to be taking a different attitude towards it there? Have we looked and researched maybe, other countries that don't have as big a problem as we do? What kind of things they do, what things it is that actually influence people and prevent this from being such a big issue there as well? So just if I could have some comments on that, please. Thanks.
Right. Emma.
Yeah, I've done some research surrounding, as you say, what other countries do, and it's not just South Lanarkshire in terms of the problems here. It is an issue all over Scotland, all over the UK. There is a definite shift from children going to primary school to going to secondary school in terms of that responsibility, in terms of what's right and wrong, and the civic pride side of things. The really good thing is an awful lot of the schools within South Lanarkshire are eco schools, going for their green flags, and litter is one of the topics that have to be covered each term or each time that they're going for a new green flag. So we definitely want to be working with those schools and making sure that the information that's getting put across for the subjects, and it's not just in the eco school group, it's across all the subjects, all the curriculum, and make sure that it is feeding back. It's a really positive time at the moment because people are spending more time in their communities, and also they're more aware of what the bigger picture is in terms of the impact that they can have on their natural environment. The kind of blue planet effect is something that we want to feed into with this strategy, because even though we're not anywhere near the beach or near the ocean, we want to link that to the impact that a kid or a resident has when they drop litter in the street, that ultimately it does go to a drain, it can go into a river, and it can end up in the ocean. And I think that's something that is not just high school pupils, it's the whole community, it's the whole population, that they have this factor that they care about the environment, and they can watch shows and think that's terrible, what impact that this is having, but they need to relate that back to their own decisions and what they do in terms of whether it's dropping their cigarette butts, or whether it's dropping that bit of chewing gum, dropping that can or fast food packaging. So it's really education and awareness on a bigger picture than just in high schools. We know that that's a problem, but ultimately it's a problem that's not just for teenagers, it is the population. So yeah, awareness and education is definitely going to be a big part going forward.
Thanks, Emma.
Chair, sorry, could I just come back in on that there, please? Emma, I really appreciate that, you know, we've got all this stuff going on and that we're linking it all together there too. But, you know, just now, and there is a big difference between primary and high school, you know, kudos with your pals, dropping litter, you know, that works for secondary pupils. Plus, there's much less supervision. They're out there buying lunches and things at lunchtime, whereas your primary school kids are still within schools there. But really, my question is about, you know, are there things that other places are doing quite differently from us that are really making an impact that we could look at actually using here?
Yeah, I mean, there's some different types of infrastructure, and also there is the personal responsibility type aspect, but it's then all coming down to a behaviour change, which is never going to be an instantaneous approach, and it is something that we'll need to feed into, not just the education side, but kind of everything that we're doing in terms of a council. So yeah, it's the behaviour change aspect that I think is something that's more different in other countries compared to here.
Thanks, Emma.
I mean, I would agree with something that Jerry said. Not all of what he said, but the very fact that he was talking about living in Canada. I lived in Canada as well. It's just a different concept. People would never think. They just don't think of dropping something. They've got just more joy about the area they live in, the responsibility for the area they live in, and it's the very same in an awful lot of European countries as well. Italy, there's frescoes in the walls that have been there for 300 years and have never even had any damage done to them, because it's a different culture, and it's changing minds. It's changing minds, and that starts from an early age and trying to take it through from there. Anyway, it's Jim Wardhall.
Yes, I would agree with what Jerry says about the amount of litter that's about. That's self-evident that that's the case, and it's lying longer. But my point was a very specific one. It was a point I raised before about fly tipping on private land. There are cases where the fly tipping is on public land. The landowner thinks it's an eyesore. The public think it's an eyesore. But the landowner has a problem. The council won't lift it because it's private land. That's fine. If the landowner himself lays out the money to remove it, he then gets charged when he takes it to the tip. And this has always seemed to me, kind of counterproductive. We should be encouraging landowners to remove fly tipping from private land, but we shouldn't then be requiring them to pay to take that to the tip. There must be some way that could be avoided, whether it's by issuing a ticket, if you like, to the landowner to say that specific consignment of fly tipping can be taken in at the waste centre free of charge. It is a problem.
Thanks, Jim. I think that's a very good suggestion. Can somebody note that and see what we can do about that? Yeah.
If I could come in, of course we'll look at it, but there has to be consideration about operational issues. How you prove that was definitely fly tipping. Also, the council would then have to cover additional costs associated with that. And again, it all boils down to how much is the council's responsibility. And I do have sympathy with private landowners, but as matters stand just now, it sits with the private landowner. But of course, we'll look at that, but it will come with a cost, Chair. And you know, the only thing I would say that this is very much about setting up the strategy, the process to the strategy. And I appreciate there's a lot of operational issues being raised here, which again, we can happy to take offline with members if appropriate.
Thanks very much, Michael. Right, we'll try and get through this as quickly as possible then. Can you tell me, Pauline, who still has hands up?
Chair, we've still got councillors Harrow, Allison, Chalmers, Logan and Loudon. So Councillor Harrow next.
Yes, please. Councillor Harrow.
Thanks. I think we can all agree with the feeling behind the report. I sometimes think that you're preaching to the converted, because those people who take a kind of respect in their area will clear away the rubbish, and then there's the others that won't. And to kind of probably downgrade Jerry's kind of standing in the council, I do agree with him that we are actually a dirty nation. We've all seen litter on the ground round a bin, and recently there are all the masks on the ground that are potentially contaminating other people. And with regard to the fly tipping, the fly tippers don't care about the cost because they get away with it. They do it in the middle of nowhere. I've got a big kind of rural kind of hinterland in my ward, and you know, they get away with it, and there's no real comeback on them. So yeah, you feel you've got to do something. I think up to a point you're whistling in the wind. Thanks.
Thanks. Alec.
Very first thing Davy Shearer said, we've got to name and shame. It's far too acceptable at the moment to be a litter loud. Yes, we can increase the number of staff we've got, but that will not solve the problem. It will help tidy up the mess. I'm also pleased a lot about what Emma was saying. This isn't just down to school kids. You go out into the rural areas, go along the side of a road, look in the fields, the amount of rubbish, sorry, I almost used another word, that has been thrown out of cars into the field, particularly Buckfast, soft drinks as well, and vodka bottles seems to be the things that we come across all the time. So a change of attitude is what we really must address and make it as unacceptable to be a litter lout as it is to be a drunk driver. The question I actually have though is, what percentage of fly tippers or fly tipping incidents is the perpetrator identified? And in what percentage of the ones that are identified are resident in our own council area?
Alec, could I get that information after the meeting and get it circulated to everybody? Because I don't think it's going to do anything for what we're discussing today. But I think your question is valid, and we should have that information. But I really don't think it's going to help us come to a conclusion here. It
will help drive the strategy, because if the majority of the fly tipping comes from people out with the South Lanarkshire, an advertising campaign is not going to be the one that prevents that.
Right. Can I ask if it's okay if we send that information round then? Eh?
Chair, absolutely, and I think the point Councillor Allison is making is that given our geography in South Lanarkshire, we border quite a few council areas, and there may be transgressions from, if I can use that term, from one council area to ours. So we can find that out. My gut reaction, I think the information might be limited, but nonetheless, we'll ask officers to provide that and circulate around members after committee.
Thanks very much. Councillor Chalmers, I think you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just kind of going back. A couple of people have mentioned this already, but this paper's about the development of a strategy. So we don't have a strategy yet. We've got the bones of it there. And I think it's really critical for it to be that community engagement with this is really meaningful, so that we get, because we've got loads of community groups and organisations that are already out there working on this, and we need to capture their priorities and their solutions, because I think folk sometimes do have good ideas that we can use, but that must include local businesses and children and young people, because it has to cover everybody, because they all contribute in some way. I think if we do that, then there'll be ownership of the strategy and the action plans, which in my experience always helps people engage more with it and be part of the solution. Just as a kind of tangible example, in Blantyre we've had a management plan round about Greenhall, Millhew. It's a lovely park we've got with waterfalls on the Clyde and the Calder, and there's been a community group. In fact, there's been more than a community group around this for a wee while, but they did a whole load of work, and officers engaged with that group to kind of learn about how the council works with this, what the rules and regulations are around it. But that community group over 2 or 3 years has changed the way that they manage in inverted commas, day to day. And if there's transgressions, like there's fly tipping, whatever, they're there taking photographs, sending it to appropriate members of the council, and getting it out in social media, saying this is our park, look what you're doing to our park. And you know, I've been there when photographs have been taken and where business names have been there, and they've gone straight into the council officer to follow up on that. So I think where we can get community groups working with us and communities highlighting the problem, saying it's our community, let's look after it. I think on neighbourhood basis and in small towns and villages, that's a wee bit easier. But I think the more we engage the community in the development of this strategy and really get them buying into it, the more success we'll have going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Hopefully that we can try and draw this to a close. Can you tell me who's still to speak?
We have Councillor Logan, Councillor Loudon, and we've just had Councillor Callaghan also.
Right, Councillor Logan.
And Michael McGlynn would like to come in also.
Okay, Councillor Logan.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting debate. Listened very carefully to everything that people were saying, and I think it is the start of, it's the bones of a strategy, of which presumably over the months we will need to put meat onto the bones that have been laid out this morning. One thing I would say is that no dog is dirty. People are dirty. The dog doesn't know what it's going out to, you know, foul pavements and roads. That's people. And that led me to the one thing I wanted to ask is, I presume that obviously there'll be follow-ups to, you know, as the strategy moves on, and what as a council we would like to do, as my colleague David Shearer says, you know, education out into the people, etc. So that's fine. But I personally think that the Scottish Government should indeed bring in more strict laws regarding dumping and private land. Or one of the things I have here, and what will be in my colleague's ward as well, is you have estates where there was one-bedded flats, or sometimes flats, you know, that didn't have a bedroom, but, you know, a corner for your bed. I think they're called solo flats or something like that. And there is a great movement of people in and out, and they just dump things in this wee sort of car park thing, and nobody ever takes responsibility. So I think there's a whole lot of things we need to do, and probably this isn't the forum where we should be sitting around trying to work that out, because there's landlords that comes into it, there's people who just willy-nilly just put things out onto the street and hope that the council or somebody will pick it up. But I would like us as a council, as we go on, to actually actively engage with the powers that be to, I mean, there's a carrot and a stick. So the carrot you try and encourage, and then the stick, if they're just not going to behave, there should be huge penalties, because Alec Allison said unacceptable as a drunk driver, but that never really worked till really, really huge penalties come in. And people then started to think, oh, and then it got, you know, the people, it became, you were a pariah if you were caught drunk driving, but it took time and it took big penalties, and I think we're needing a whole mix of things. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Oldham. Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. Sorry, I was just getting off mute there. At the start of the strategy, we've got this sort of next step documents with the proposed timeframe, and it talks about identifying and engaging with local stakeholders and national stakeholders. Can I suggest that when we're doing that, we look at including housing developers who have been building either at the moment or over the last few years? The reason I'm saying that is Councillor Fulton and I have been involved with litter picks around some of the new estates in our ward with the community council. And what happens is if you've got a sort of gap site, so there's areas in one estate, for example, where there's a pylon, so there needs to be a certain amount of clearance between the houses. So it essentially becomes what will eventually grow into a community park. And in the sort of corners of that, in the nooks and crannies, you've got broken tiles, you've got bits of plastic pipe, you've essentially got wee bits and pieces of building waste. And it's just the broken window effect. What happens then is people just feel free to litter because it looks a mess anyway, and it looks like even more of a mess, so it has this cumulative effect. So I would ask that that's something we consider when we're trying to identify stakeholders.
Thanks very much, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Callaghan, and I think we'll wrap it up after that.
Thank you, Chair. Just very, very briefly, I was having a wee look there at the cleanest countries in the world, and just a wee bit of information is that we seem to come fourth pretty regularly in that. There's a variety of countries coming first, second, and third, so maybe we're not quite as bad as we think we are. Still work to do though. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Fine, if there's no other questions from colleagues, can I move the recommendations?
Oh, sorry, you took me surprise there, Chair. I second it.
Well, you're going to sleep there, Maureen, waiting so long. Are we agreed?
Was it loud picking?
Agreed. We're agreed, right. Let's move on then to item 7, which is Clyde Ready Climate Adaptation Strategy, and it's Leslie Hinchelwood to report on this, please. Leslie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to update the committee on the Council's response to the consultation on Climate Ready Clyde's adaptation strategy. Section 3 of the report provides background to Climate Ready Clyde partnership and the 8 local authority areas that are covered by the partnership as outlined in the map provided at Appendix 1. Section 3.3 of the report provides information on the need to adapt to climate change. Even if we achieve net zero tomorrow, there's still historic carbon emissions that will continue to affect our climate over the next decade and beyond. So it's important that we understand what those risks and opportunities are in relation to a changing climate and what they mean for our society, our economy, and ensuring that they are climate resilient. Solutions for climate adaptation vary from one context to another, and they can range from building flood defences or setting up early warning systems for heat waves, to redesigning our communication systems, business operations and government policies. Section 3.4 refers to the risk and opportunity assessment for the city region and sets out the risks and opportunity posed by climate change and highlights the areas where more action is needed over the next 5 years. The findings and recommendations in this assessment, along with the theory of change, forms the basis of the adaptation strategy and action plan. Section 4 of the report outlines the aims of the strategy, along with the information on the social impact assessment and strategic environmental assessment that formed part of the strategy development. The draft strategy and the accompanying strategic environmental assessment were open for public consultation during November and December 2020. The consultation closed on the 24th of December 2020, and the Council had submitted a draft response to the consultation, but subject to approval from this committee at today's meeting. So any changes to the response following today's meeting will be resubmitted to Climate Ready Clyde. A copy of the response can be found at Appendix 2, and just some of the main points to highlight from the response includes that the planning system has a key role in adapting to climate change, as well as reducing our carbon emissions and building that climate resilience. So NPF 4, National Performance Framework 4, will be key to seeing what that looks like when it's released. The draft strategy feels very much city-based, and there is a need to ensure that all our towns, villages and rural areas across the 8 local authorities are fully represented. And in terms of the Clyde corridor that's mentioned within the strategy, this must include the whole of the River Clyde. So for South Lanarkshire, that means it doesn't just stop at Clyde Gateway, as it does in the criteria for the Mission Clyde projects. Section 5 of the report outlines the next steps, which is finalising the strategy's action plan, and it's hoped that this will be available by the end of March this year, next month. An updated report on the action plan will be submitted to the committee in due course. Section 6 refers to employee implications, and the development of the action plan will involve the council's contributions and will require input from officers across the council. Section 7 refers to financial implications, and there is a need for capital investment when it comes to climate adaptation. One of the interventions in the draft strategy is to increase adaptation finance through leverage and innovation. Sections 8, 9 and 10 relate to sustainability, climate change, equality and other impacts, and there's no significant impacts from these sections in relation to a response. So I refer back to section 2 of the covering report, and the committee has asked that the response to the consultation on Climate Ready Clyde's adaptation strategy for Glasgow City Region is approved. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Leslie. I think members should be made aware that at the Glasgow City Region Cabinet meeting yesterday, I raised the subject of Clyde Mission again and managed to gain support from all 7 other authorities to lobby the Scottish Government to make sure that the Clyde Mission does not stop at Clyde Gateway but goes the full length of the Clyde. And for anybody that knows a bit about it, there's very valid reasons for this, and there's tranches of money that come forward at present because it stops at Clyde Gateway. We're not able to apply for those. So hopefully I'll keep people posted on where we go with that, but we've already enlisted support of local MSPs to lobby the government to try and make sure that the Clyde Mission is extended the full length of the Clyde, and I'll keep people abreast of that. Okay. Do any colleagues have questions of Leslie?
Councillor McAdams, Chair.
Councillor McAdam.
John, just before I say to Leslie, thanks very much for doing that. I think that's brilliant, and it's great to know as a local authority that we were one of the people then pushing that forward. So thanks for everything that you did yesterday. Leslie, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. What I wanted to say was I was really pleased to see in the appendix for the draft consultation that you felt that one of the key elements from the planning perspective should be the woodland creation and expansion. So I warmly welcome that. I think it's brilliant. When I was looking at like question 3 though, and it was just like, you know, how the strategy set out the 11 basically interventions, I wanted to question you with regards to number 2, number 4 and number 5, because like the response that we had put as an authority was just important, and for reasons I'll go on to explain, I think they should actually be the same as the other ones as being extremely important. When we talk about number 2, developing the ability of organisations, business and communities, you know, and we want, and the number 4 again is about communities, and then number 5 obviously is about, you know, monitoring and reflection. The reason why I'm pointing that out is because when we go to question 6, one of the things you put that you think that it's important you talk about the community uptake, and also when it's the other feedback, like you say that going forward, one of the key themes is ensuring that people and communities buy into the climate change agenda. And I kind of feel as if you're not contradicting yourself, because that's not what I mean, but it's just like you're actually pointing out, like in other bits, that it's, and again, at the same time, wait a minute, so it's important to make sure everybody has an opportunity to shape their places. Again, that's community buy-in. And I just kind of feel with these, especially those 2 points with regards to community, that they shouldn't be just important, they should be extremely important, because it's like we've talked about with every single thing today. If you don't get community buy-in, then basically just further exacerbates the problem. And I was obviously, like John had mentioned with regards to the Clyde, and I think that was really important, because I know in my ward alone, it's just like that I've got flooding issues that comes from other authorities, you know, and their management or mismanagement of water courses then affects, you know, the lands management, the animal management, you know, and aquatic management from the Clyde into my area. So I would just, so the question basically is there any way that you could change your responses from being just important to extremely important? Because I believe that the community buy-in is completely essential. Thank you, and it's a great report.
Thanks very much, Councillor McAdams. Yeah, when we done the response, it was a collective view from officers. So it's not saying that these aren't extremely important, but it was just kind of trying to kind of rank them. But if councillors today feel that this should be moved to extremely important, then I'm happy to do that and feed that back to Climate Ready Clyde.
John, I would like that to happen, please.
Well, I'll bring in Michael first, just to give us some background on that, Marie, before we go further.
Thank you, John.
I think it's just to add to Leslie's point. This is the reason why we brought this report to committee. One, to increase members' awareness of this particular issue, and it's a kind of higher level discussion as well. And we intend to bring a further report similar to this in the future. And when you look to try and deal with such a substantial, significant topic as climate change, and then try to rank it in a various sets of questions, and then on the scale, Councillor McAdams, it's really quite subjective to some extent. And you know, you could argue it's important or extremely important, and to some extent, it's that's absolutely fine. And that's why we brought it to committee, to get council's views on this. So, Chair, if we're happy with that, as officers, we'd be happy to change that, and then we reflect that back. And if other members are also got a consensus on it, we can just change that response and update Climate Ready Clyde and the reasons for that, Chair. So that's exactly the reason why we brought it to committee. Thanks, Chair.
Well, before we go any further, has anybody got any objection to us changing those to extremely important at this point?
No problem.
No.
That's good. Yep.
Right, go ahead then on that one. Thanks, Monique.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Callaghan, I'm not sure if anyone else has had their hand up, but I see Councillor Callaghan's hand.
Chair, I just put my hand down there. I was just going to come in and support Monique and say, yep, right. I would absolutely back that. Thank you. Right.
Does any other colleague have any questions to ask on this report?
No further hands raised, Chair.
Thanks very much. I think it's probably quite important as well, Leslie, there are some good developments coming from the Glasgow City region just now about the climate ready forest and canopy cover, etc. And I think it would be good if we could get those slides through from Glasgow City region and sort of share them with colleagues here in South Lanarkshire, so that we get a better overall picture of where we're going in the future. So that's something maybe we can look at, Leslie, Michael, going forward.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay,
I think absolutely, Chair. Again, through yourself, if you're happy, we can bring just an update report back for our members' awareness on that, because that's going to be quite a significant project, which is probably going to run for about 5 or 10 years or so. Yeah. So bring that back next time.
Okay, thanks very much. Right, I'm going to move recommendation. Can we get a seconder?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll second.
Right, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. We move on to item for noting, which is education resources sustainability activity. And it's poor Lynn that's been waiting for a couple of hours that can speak to this one. Lynn.
Yep. Afternoon, everybody. It's been an interesting debate. My first time to come to committee and hear the various kind of topics that get discussed. I've been asked to come along just to provide a bit of an update in terms of education resources. So really the purpose of the report is to update the committee on some of the current and some of the proposed future sustainable activities that are going to go on within education resources. In terms of background, just in section 3, it's about acknowledging that our establishments have always been involved in a wide range of activities to engage the active learning of children and young people and to help promote and develop learning for sustainability. And that has included involving a number of other council departments and also external agencies to allow us to promote and undertake kind of environmentally sustainable initiatives. So in the report, I think there's about 10 different things listed there, just to give you a kind of flavour, and I wasn't going to go through them all, maybe just to pick up on a couple of them, if that's okay. Eco schools and eco committees, we have 68 schools that are registered as having the green flag status through the Eco Schools Scotland programme. And we have most of our schools have a learner-led eco committee run by the pupils. So it allows our children and young people really to learn about, to coordinate and to lead the response to climate change and sustainability, and to try and bring about that behavioural change and have influence within their school community, which maybe will roll on to being, you know, in the home environment and then out into the kind of wider local community as well. There's a few other things there about reducing single-use plastics. We know that's something that captures the imagination a lot in schools, and there are various schemes out there, the Free by 23, and I think there's another one that more than one use is no use or something. So there's various different projects that schools have on the go to keep the idea about recycling and reducing the use of single-use plastic. Really probably to jump on maybe 3.6 to 3.8 initiatives such as the Beat the Street, the Walk to School Week and the air quality workshops. All of them we've been involved in and they've been successful, particularly Beat the Street. We know how successful that is when they run. Really about raising awareness to the negatives of pollution, car pollution, and the benefits of walking, you know, to school and within your local community as well, both in terms of physical health and well-being, but also for sustainable travel as well. There's a bit at the bottom about tree planting and food growing. We do have a number of schools who have planted their own trees, orchards, they have gardens within the school grounds, and some schools who are involved in more large-scale projects with the Woodlands Trust about the planting of trees. And the benefits that come from that too. And then taking the garden initiatives, the growing of the fruit and veg, children learn about the natural world and about sustainable food growing, and then about taking that into the classroom and preparing food and moving that into the promoting healthy eating as well, and the dual link that you can have there. Moving on to section 4, just a bit about the planned activity as we go forward. We know that local authorities are going to be key to driving behavioural changes to reduce our carbon emissions, and really recognising the significant part that education has to play in terms of the education of issues around the climate emergency, and the importance of the joint effect of collective and individual actions, which then go on to bring about a sustainable environment through behavioural changes. So again, there's about 8 areas I think listed in the report, maybe just to identify a small number. The first one there in terms of curriculum improvement at 4.3, we have been working with Education Scotland at the moment, and we are helping, well, a number of local authorities are about building up a network of practitioners in the area of learning for sustainability, and it's about raising the profile now. We are at that moment in time where the spotlight is on, and especially with COP26, and that will help develop the curriculum nationally and for South Lanarkshire as well, obviously. Internal to South Lanarkshire, we have plans to bring in a temporary post, a 2-year post, and again we've been linking with Education Scotland about what the remit of that post would look like. And it will be a post that has kind of dual aspects to it. It is about STEM, it's about curriculum in STEM, but it's also about sustainability, so that whilst we are learning about science and technology, that we can bring in and merge, you know, the science and the data and the stats in terms of climate emergency and raise the profile on that subject. It's 2 years, it will be 70% funded by an organisation called the Wood Foundation, and the balance of that budget will come from education's existing resources. We'll find money from our own budgets to pay for that. 4.5 in terms of shared practice, I think that's quite important. We know that there are lots of good things out there, but we haven't really captured what happens, and we haven't really defined what impact they're having, and which ones, if we were going to look to devise a kind of best practice of sustainability initiatives, etc., which ones are most impactful. So we have given an undertaking that we'll be collating that information and then disseminating back good practice so that we can consolidate that across all of our schools. 4.6 in terms of COP26, it was to highlight that we have managed to secure a piece of kind of journalism work, if you like, that we will be allowed to put a number of our learners into the kind of back office, if you like, of COP26, and they will be allowed to be reporting live from the conference in November in a kind of newsroom style fashion. So they will be doing podcasts or video links, and they'll be sharing information about what the environmental issues are and what's been coming up, etc. And we're hoping to kind of capture that moment and capture that enthusiasm, bring that back to South Lanarkshire Council, and from that run our own COP26 within South Lanarkshire Council for the young people. So I think that will be really exciting, and should lift, you know, and engage and motivate as we move forward. The one other thing I probably wanted to bring your attention to is paragraph 4.10, where we've got a heading there, young people engaged in planning and decision making, and it was to let you know that we're currently thinking about that. We're investigating the possibility of creating a kind of young person's forum for sustainability, but we're kind of thinking out how we might do that and how we gather some young people from across our schools and create that body. But then how do we take what we're learning and the voice that's coming out and move that into the community environment? So we're thinking about working in with our community engagement team. We know that Ros Gallagher, who's our Youth, Family and Community Learning Services Manager, she's actually got the lead in education for community engagement. But I think we have to look to see how we can strengthen that and maybe develop that. And also, I was speaking to Rhonda Leith about the locality partnerships, and she was saying that we're going to be having another look at the reps just to make sure that all parts of the community are represented. And we could have a look at the kind of youth and how we canvass and how we bring forward and how we decipher what topics are important, etc. So we're looking to strengthen all of that, and hopefully that will raise the profile of the young person's voice, maybe bring it into some of these arenas, and it might then bring forward information that could be useful to the council at strategic level and this committee in terms of maybe making decisions going forward. So I would be interested if any members have ideas about how we might be able to do that, but just to let you know, we were thinking about how we can strengthen the voice of our young people as well. So that's the kind of main areas, just in terms of the report then, in terms of the recommendations, just to note that both the progress made within education and also the planned activity on sustainability going forwards.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Very informative report, and I definitely think there's probably room there for Maureen and the Community Planning Partnership to become involved in this as well. But it really lets the colleagues here see just exactly what's going on. And obviously, this is the way future. If we're trying to change minds, this is the way we need to look at doing it. So very informative. I'll open it up for a couple of questions from colleagues, but ask people to try and keep them short, seeing as we're actually running very, very much over time. Monique, I think your hand's up, and then I see Stephanie's hand's up as well.
Thanks, Chair. Lynn, that's a great report. Thanks very much. It's really informative. I just wanted to say to you, see with regards to Beat the Street, I loved Beat the Street and I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a really good initiative, but I felt we did it at the wrong time because we were encouraging kids to go out and walk at basically like a season where it was like really rainy, and then it meant when they were going into schools they were like sitting with wet clothes. So that's the only thing I say about that, but I do think it is a brilliant initiative. And also see when it was like 3.9 and you were talking about the tree plant in the gardens, I thought it was worth also saying that I thought it was brilliant with Duncanrig and how it was Michael McCabe and somebody else. It was two pupils that had managed to get like a top award, a top horticulture award, and that was obviously done through different people working with them, and obviously there would have been community involvement as well. So again, it shows that it's all working and working really well for the fact they're getting outside awards. I just wanted to say though, see with like, say for instance, the fact that as a local authority, we do buy into like the ethos of like, you know, forest school, and we're encouraging our teachers to do that as well. Is it something that when the new schools are being built, that I know as an authority, we kind of like stopped putting trees in places because there was like, you know, they needed to be maintained and then they were within school grounds? Are we going to go back to starting putting, you know, trees into school grounds so that we can actually cultivate areas within the school that's then free from litter and from needles and other things, so that it means that the teachers have got a safe area so that they can actually like do forest school with the pupils?
I'm back in. There's a lot in that. I'll maybe just take bits and pieces as you've said. In terms of Beat the Street, you're right, it can have different impacts depending on when you run it, but you kind of lose the impetus if you don't keep it going. And I know that in East Kilbride, I've got some stats here. In East Kilbride, the stats that came from that said that 17% of the entire local population took part, and over that 6-week period, they had amalgamated 125,000 miles of travel on foot. We know it's really successful and the kids love it, the young people love it, and they just gravitate to it. But when you walk away, it can die down a bit, and you would always like to do it in the summer months to try and get the habit that might then continue on. But it comes down to some of the kit, I think, that we have. We have a limited amount of, you know, the machines that get set up and then taken down and then move into another area. But it is something to bear in mind. We've got notification that we are starting another one soon. I don't know if it's been announced or whatever, but we're going to be doing another one in one of our areas starting, I think, in March, hopefully for March. In terms of Duncanrig also got money from the Elizabeth B. Mitchell Trust just recently, and they're using that to enhance the garden that they've got there, and they're going to turn that into a community garden as well and forge links between the community. So we might see more Duncanrig pupils get involved in local community activities, which can only be a good thing as well. Forest schools, yeah, I think we need to think about that. We did have tree planting, and then it was the roots, the damage to the building, and we kind of stepped back. We had some schools that had nice natural areas quite close to them, but it was all, you know, it was health and safety at that moment in time. But we've completely changed our thoughts on forest schools and our attitudes, and we risk assess everything before we do it. I think we need to take some advice about whether we should go back to tree planting. But I wonder myself about the scale of it and how we scale up. And I'm just minded, I think we've learned so much because of COVID that when COVID hit, it was an emergency, it was a pandemic, and the climate emergency should have the same kind of sense of urgency, and we quite quickly amassed swathes of people who would volunteer to do anything, you know, food drops and medical deliveries or whatever, and who were willing to help. And I'm wondering about whether, we've just been talking in the background about whether we could get a volunteer list that's of a significant level if the council were of a mind that they wanted to do, or other community organisations were of a mind that they wanted to do something larger scale, and then maybe pupils and other parts of the community could take part in that. So I think we have to think about the 3s and 4s trees that you might plant around a school compared to something you might do larger scale in the community. I think Stephen Academy were involved with Woodlands Trust, and they've planted, not saying it's the kids, but as part of the project, 10,000 trees in the X number of years. So I think we need to think of the bigger scale thing as well, but we'll think about all of these things as we move forward with sustainability.
Chair, can I just have a subsequent, please? The other thing as well, Lynn, like based on what you just said there, was I think, you know, you're totally right. It would be a different type of tree, say for instance, that you would want within a school to being outside, and it'd just be like for us to think about the trees with medicinal properties that the teachers then can use, basically like in the forest school, and also the things that they can teach kids with, whether it's the 2 different types of chestnut, obviously one for eating and the other one for conkers, you know, just wee simple things like that, you know, and it just means that they then could have like pear trees, apple trees, and it just means that it's something that then becomes natural, because I just think that would be the way forward. So it'd be good if that's something that we could actually look at. Thank you.
Councillor Ross, you're muted.
Sorry, Stephanie, I said thanks, Monique, but Stephanie, if you could possibly come in now.
Thanks, John. We never seem to learn about the mute button, do we? You were mentioning there, Lynn, absolutely great report and great answers there. It's great to hear some really creative thinking around this kind of stuff here. You were talking about 10,000 trees. I'm going to mention the 1,000 Huts campaign. That's something that really seems to be taking off just now. We've got the Reforesting Scotland charity and stuff like that as well there. And Scotland has got a long history, you know, of hutting, of people having a little hut where they go away and they live sustainably and they get a few days break and enjoy your countryside and enjoy your beautiful country there. And I'm wondering, when you're talking about young people getting engaged in the planning and decision making and having those kind of resources there, we've got Forest Rangers already working with young people for Holy Cross High School and stuff too there. There's also a lot of talk as well, you know, about academic skills and everything, that we need to be valuing other skills and talents that young people have as well, and really, you know, giving them equal value, I suppose. Kind of practical stuff, building, whether you're talking about forest school and you're talking about building dens and stuff, it's always something that captures young people's interest, that they really enjoy doing. It's something as well, when you go along as parents to it, that all the parents love doing the things as well there. So I'm wondering if there's maybe some way that we could bring that into it to some degree as well there, because these are really quite simple projects that you can do. You can make really basic shelters, and particularly after COVID, we've got a whole load of poverty out there as well, and actually maybe building little hutting communities where people can take their kids for a break or whatever, actually doing that bit of sustainable living is absolutely the best way to learn. So I'm just wondering if that's an idea that we could maybe have a wee look into and possibly take forward. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. Listen, folks, I think we're going to have to try and draw this to a close. Do we have any other colleagues who would like a question asked?
Chair, no hands raised.
Right, thanks very much. Can I then move to recommendation that we note the item?
I'll second, Chair.
Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thanks very much. Listen, thanks everyone for their contributions today. Very interesting agenda, and I hope everybody got something out of the meeting. And hopefully, thanks very much everybody for taking part, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chair. Well done in Clyde Mission, John. Great outcome.